Sleepy Hollow is a TV show that should have never been canceled, and it sucks because it had such a good trajectory. But the abuse of Nicole Bahari as an actress and the loss of Abigail Mills as a character really impacted the show's ratings, and rightfully so. But prior to the unfortunate end of one of the best TV shows of the 2010s, Abbie and Ichabod kept me coming back every week. And when I couldn't catch it on TV, I would definitely catch it the next day on Hulu. And so for today, I'm happy to talk about Abbie Mills. But before I get into her character, it's Black Witch Month, which means that for every day that I can this month, I'll be covering a Black Witch in TV or movie. And today, it's Abbie Mills from Sleepy Hollow. So before I get started, Abbie Mills is not a witch, but she does possess supernatural abilities, so I think she deserves a spot on this list. So Abbie had a really rough childhood growing up. Her father had alcoholism and her mother struggled with mental health issues, and this meant that for Abbie and her sister, they were often left to their own devices. At one point in their childhood, their mother was institutionalized and their father couldn't really bear to be around them, and he would often disconnect using alcohol. This meant that for Abbie and her sister, they were often left to their own devices, getting into petty mischief, committing crimes, and skipping school. But there was one fateful day where Abbie and Jenny went into the woods and they saw 4 white trees. And these 4 white trees were obviously quite unsettling to the 2 young girls, but it was what they saw after that point that would scar them for the rest of their lives. Because unbeknownst to everyone else, both Abbie and Jenny saw a demon that day. What's even more bizarre is that after the event happened, the girls went missing for 4 days. And when they were eventually found, they had no recollection of the events at all. Now, Abbie, unlike her sister, who was a bit younger, was a little smarter, and she had told her sister not to tell the townspeople and the sheriffs what they had seen. Her sister, on the other hand, being young and a bit hard-headed, didn't listen, because that event is what ended up getting her sister institutionalized, because seeing 4 white trees in a forest is not uncommon, but seeing a demon is. And this is something that Abbie would later struggle with for the rest of her life because her and her sister fell out after it, because her sister felt as though she didn't have her back. However, it does seem like after the events of the forest incident, Abbie did get her life together. She turned herself around, found a mentor, finished school, and eventually ended up in the Sleepy Hollow Sheriff's Department as a lieutenant. But one fateful night, her friend and mentor, Sheriff Corbin, was investigating a call about a disturbance. And this is where the events of the series would take a sharp left. Because as her friend / mentor was investigating the scene, he came across the Headless Horseman. Like the literal Headless Horseman. And of course, this resulted in his untimely demise. He passed away, and this left Abbie feeling empty. Because for the longest time, that was the only person she was able to genuinely connect with. Sadly, Abbie witnesses the whole thing because they were both there on site together. Now, at the same time, once Abbie returns to the station, she's also aware of a man who'd been arrested named Ichabod Crane. And Ichabod Crane seems crazy to her. He's talking about being from the 1700s, how he was in the Revolutionary War, how he needed to fight the Hessians, and nobody believes him. But Abbie, having had experiences with nobody believing her in the past, appears to be a little bit more receptive. Side note, it should also be noted that prior to the events of her mentor's death happening, Abbie had considered leaving the Sleepy Hollow Sheriff's Department and going to work for the FBI. Anyways, her and Ichabod connect as peers, and this is where things really get interesting, because Ichabod uses his knowledge of the Revolutionary War and his time as a soldier and a secret soldier in George Washington's army to work through the mysteries and the events that are plaguing Sleepy Hollow. And of course, Abbie, believing this man is initially crazy, but proceeding to go along with it anyways, finds herself into the midst of an apocalyptic battle. Because Abbie, much like Ichabod, her partner, is a witness. Now, like I said, Abbie doesn't really have any real superpowers, but she reminds me more of the divine pairings from Cloak and Dagger, right? These are 2 people who have a purpose to stop the end of the world. And in this case, it's Abbie and Ichabod. Strangely enough, Abbie's former relative, Abigail Dixon, was also a witness. But when Ichabod died in the Revolutionary War, or was sealed to the Horsemen, he was unable to fulfill his role. Think of him as Aang from the Avatar getting trapped in the iceberg. So the 2 of them, as witnesses, face any number of mythological threats, from Pandora's box to a witch to a murderous son to the horseman himself, All of these things are occurring in this small town. And if you really like the show like I did, you'll also remember the brief Bones crossover, which I thought was an iconic moment. But back to Abbie as a witness, because it's those abilities that ink Abbie a spot on this list. As a witness, Abbie is part of an eternal order, and the people who harness the spirit of the witness are immortal to a sense, like in a sense. They can physically die, their bodies can cease to exist, but the spirit of the witness is one that is transcendent, meaning it can go from person to person. It's kind of like the Avatar in a sense. I know there's a lot of parallels here, but that's the best way I can describe it, in addition to that of the divine pairing, in which there's two. Now, as a witness, Abbie has a few supernatural abilities. She can see ghosts, she can cast some spells, she can decipher ciphers. In addition to this, she can also have prophetic visions and dreams. And this is something that has plagued Abbie for most of her life. Now, despite Abbie's upbringing and the spiritual trauma she went through as a child, she ended up being rather level-headed. In addition to this, she's kind, a little funny, stern, and despite all of the supernatural events she's witnessed in her life, she still manages to keep an air of skepticism about her. But overall, she's extremely loyal and one of the best friends that Crane has ever had, and you can really tell in their relationship how deep the bond between the two of them goes. And I must say, this is one of the best platonic relationships that I've seen in TV. I loved Abbie and Crane as characters and as friends, and I think the two of them together were fantastic TV. But if you liked Abbie Mills, please drop it in the comments. I know this video is short. I am short on time today. If you want to know more about Sleepy Hollow, I am happy to